Mr. Arun Karna with us on board today, and the MD and CEO of ABB Network Services India. And he is a great mentor, and he's mentored many students, even in IIT, and even you can see his YouTube videos also. And he's really knowledgeable. So let's have a great session. Yeah. So over to you.
Thank you, Armika, and good morning, friends. As you heard, my name is Arun Karna. I am the MD and CEO for AT&T in India. And the topic that we have at hand this morning is extremely relevant unprecedented circumstances. And we're going to talk about how it's imperative in these unprecedented times to innovate. So innovation and skills pivot that will help businesses not only to survive but also thrive in the new normal. That's going to be the gist of our discussion. Now, I believe everyone is coming to terms with the fact that this COVID-19 situation, it's not a short-term thing, right? So no one is able to predict as to when the current episode will subside. But one thing is sure that even when it subsides, the world will never be the same again. So we would not go back to how the world was earlier. So there will be the so-called new normal. The problem is, even now, no one knows what that new normal would look like. Because I think with each passing day, each passing week, what the new normal would look like, the view that is changing on the go. But what does this really mean from a business perspective? I think from a business perspective, it means there is the increasing need, there is an accelerated need to innovate, to be able to survive and maybe even thrive. So, everyone's been talking of innovation, and the word innovation is being bandied about very liberally. So I thought I'll go back into the dictionary to look at the literal word meaning of the word innovation. What does it really mean by the Webster dictionary? Okay, so I found usual suspects there. It was change, alteration, revolution, upheaval. But interestingly, it was a long list, and I found these phrases as well. So it says a break with tradition, a shift of emphasis, a departure, a change of direction. Now, these are interesting phrases to describe in the word innovation. And I would urge you to keep these phrases in mind as we move forward with our discussion. So first of all, I would like to say that I don't have too many slides, which I think is good. So, I don't want to bore you with a lot of PPT, but hopefully our discussion would be interesting. So I'll start off by quoting Charles Darwin here, who said, "It is not the strongest of the species that survive, nor the most intelligent, but the one most responsive to change." And of course, he was talking about the survival of the species, but I think it's equally true of businesses in today's world. So what this means for enterprises, and especially startups, I would say, is that there should be the ability to sense and adapt in real time to their operating environment. So what's happening around you, what's happening in your operating environment, you sense it, you adapt, you see things coming early. Now, easier said than done, but I think that's the big mantra: sense and adapt. So those businesses, whether big or small, that can pivot with full flexibility while going full speed, they will pull ahead of competitors. Now, again, easier said than done. These are like motherhood statements. Everyone knows that. But how does that? How does one go about doing it? And are there live examples of doing that? So, I'm going to cite a few examples. So, in the current times, you would have seen a lot of startups coming out and innovating in various various areas. The three most prominent areas that I'm seeing are fintech, health tech, and edutech. Now, these are the three areas where innovation has really kicked off. And by the way, innovation need not be some big bang stuff. It's not stuff coming out of labs where nerdy scientists are poring over stuff and bringing something out which the world has never seen. Innovation can also be repackaging of ideas. It can be bringing something forth in a different manner. Innovation could be very incremental. So it need not be big bang stuff. Small stuff counts. Small stuff adds up to big stuff. And let me cite a few examples of that very close to our lives. And this is not some revelation I'm bringing about here. I've just picked up some random headlines from recent business news. These are random headlines that I've picked up. So nothing, this is nothing by way of a revelation or something. So look at the fintech sector, and these are Indian startups, and look at how they have been innovating in the so-called evolving new normal. I think there's a lot of work that has gone on here, a lot of smart thinking, a lot of sensing and adapting. A few examples here, Bangalore-based Instamojo, they came up with an initiative for essential businesses such as pharmacies, something called Priority KYC, which allows businesses to go online within 5 minutes of registering. There's this example from Sequoia capital-based Razorpay that has partnered with a company called Rentlight. Rentlight is a division of Featherlight, and they have come out with corporate offers to enable people to rent office furniture for working from home environments. As you know, most companies which are in the so-called knowledge business or technology-enabled businesses who do not require a necessary presence on a particular premise or location, they have all enabled people to work from home. I've been working from home for the last 13 weeks straight, and I was the kind of person who was constantly traveling, rarely at home during weekdays. And when this whole thing started, I said, "Oh my God, how am I going to operate?" But for the last 13 odd weeks, I haven't ventured out of my home, and my operational efficiency, I think, has gone up a little bit, not down. So work from home has really, at least in certain verticals and industries, has proven to be successful. But it has brought its own challenges, and some of the startups are now thinking of ways to sort of come in and help those situations, and in that process, have their own business going. So we're talking of Razorpay. The other initiative they launched was same day settlements to their supplier partners ecosystem. So you get the settlement within a few hours instead of waiting 3 to 5 working days, and this helps the whole cash flow situation. Now, certain startups have sort of seen how things are evolving, and they're offering a variety of products and services which are basically a result of the COVID-19 situation. So, for example, insurance coverage against COVID-19. So Paytm, for example, they have tied up with Reliance General Insurance to offer COVID-19 insurance policies. Then you have phone pay, where they're offering something called Corona Care, Bajaj Allianz, and where the customers need not actually take any medical tests prior to purchasing the policy. And you can actually go and just buy the policy from the company's app, and it is very smooth and takes less than 2 minutes. So, I'm not trying to be a salesman for a certain set of companies, but these are business headlines from recent past. So not a surprise. And if you see here, none of this is really earth-shaking, right? These are basic smart ideas that have been brought to reality in quick time, but they're having a great impact. So These are examples from India in our own environment from the fintech sector. But let's cast an eye on the other sector, which is healthcare and health tech. And let's talk about this sector a little bit because this is the talk of the town, right? Healthcare combined with health tech is bringing forth what is being called digitally delivered healthcare. Now, here is where the vision of digitally appreciated. And it's a structural shift. It's a structural shift on not only consumer side. So people who want, of course, they are, a lot of us are thankful that some of the healthcare elements and companies or hospitals, you name it, all of them are rushing to build their own digital platform. Okay, while they are super busy trying to cope up with the situation, they realize that they have to make this huge digital shift to be able to serve and also stay relevant in a sense. So, you think of doctors, hospitals, insurance companies, pharmaceutical companies, pharmacy, distribution channels, all of them are making as one aspect. On bringing vaccines or cures or basic intensifying the research in this care. These are and these circumstantial innovation happening is that the situation is bringing into importance the two key ingredients for innovation: collaboration and transparency. So, with that in mind, there are a lot of digital space platforms, startup platforms that are coming to the fore. Examples here.
Arun sir,
These
your
are
voice is breaking.
obviously not the only examples. Sorry, is my voice breaking?
Your
Yes,
voice
sir.
Can you hear me?
from the past.
Actually, your voice is breaking in the middle, sir. In the between, like it's going off completely. Uh,
You
It's
can
like
showing off.
turn off the video and
yeah, Urmika, I
Let me
suggest
let
we all can do that because of that there might be a little more loss.
yeah. Let me stop the video. Okay. Uh, okay. Can you hear me any better now?
Yes.
Okay. Uh, so I was talking about this platform called GitHub, and what GitHub is. This is a space where scientists who are, researching around the globe, they transparently upload their COVID-19 research material, results, observation, so that it can be shared with peers transparently across the globe on something called COD19, which is basically stands for COVID-19 Open Research Data Set. And it provides a treasure of coronavirus related material that's uploaded for the scientific community to share and view. And here, AI and NLP experts can access, they can generate new insights, and that basically accelerates the whole process of innovation. Also, in this whole scheme of things, governments are a big player, right? So any large scale initiative in this segment, the healthcare, health tech, is largely anchored by government funding, government initiatives, And that's intuitive because governments have that kind of scale and impact. Now, to help the governments around the world, who are, the governments are dealing with the volume of requests for tests and, to generate statistics and, analyze those statistics and act on those and form policies or issue directions. A lot of startups are coming for innovative solutions in those areas as well. So, for example, again, I have a US example here. It's a company called Levels. And what Levels is basically it's a metabolic health tracking system which is bringing awareness of glucose monitoring and other metabolic health measures that may influence morbidity rates amongst people that are infected. So, all these are key elements. They are being driven by startups who saw an opportunity even in adversity. They rose to the challenge, they rose to the occasion, they decided to do something about it, and they came out with something which had an immediate impact. So, let me then shift the discussion here a little bit. So, yes, the thing is, there is opportunity in adversity for sure. And a lot of startups are seeing new opportunities emerge in this crisis. Uh, some of them, they might not be seeing these opportunities directly, but they are innovating to re-engineer their business models, or they're collaborating with other businesses to help those businesses cater to their current demand. So, for example, you would have heard of the car rental company called Zoom Car. It's a self-drive car rental startup. Their model was sort of car renting. Uh, Obviously, with this current situation, that's taken a hit. So, they looked around and said, what can we do in these scenarios? So they quickly pivoted and they looked at B2B institutional kind of cases to diversify. So now they're collaborating with emergency essential services, delivery based services. So providers such as large food tech companies, logistics companies, health tech players, government services, and they're branching out to those sort of segments to make sure that their business keeps going. The other thing that is coming into play is, there's largely the sentiment is, especially within the startup community, and I hope that sentiment pervades all businesses, is the sentiment of let's get on with it. Uh, because see, I would say most startup entrepreneurs have got used to facing money concerns, big or small. The startup ecosystem has ongoing money concerns, and over a period of time you learn to cope with it. So this situation that the crisis has brought about has somewhat exacerbated that situation. But the real successful startups, they're not sort of standing in a corner and crying. They're saying, okay, it is what it is. Now what do we do about it? Let's get on with it. Now, one example that I would cite here is, and again, I found this example very interesting. This is from the US again, a company called Care Split. Now, basically, Care Split, when it was originally thought of, it was supposed to be a platform that let parents coordinate with each other to watch each other's children. So in the US, there's this babysitter concept, and increasingly in India now with young working couples, babysitter at home while parents are away either working or they're out somewhere. So it was mooted as a platform that would help parents coordinate with each other to watch each other's children rather than employ a babysitter, because there are concerns around safety and all that stuff. So this startup was about to launch. It was in its beta version and ready to be rolled out. And they were targeting many customers co-working spaces as well, and they were sort of saying, where do we go and find our customers and how do we get started? And then the COVID-19 situation hit. And what happened with that was uh, parents were actually staying at home already. No one was going out. So if parents are staying at home, they are at home and they're taking care of their babies. So within weeks away from launching, now they were saying, what do we do with our business? Whole business model is no longer maybe relevant, at least for the foreseeable future. So what do we do? So then they realize that, hang on, the whole situation has changed. Parents are at home, but now their children are taking online classes. And by the way, if parents are at home, but they're not free, they're working. They are doing their online jobs, they're working from home. And by the way, their working hours are never ending now, because there are no set working hours anymore. So now parents are struggling with a full-time remote job, and their children are online, and the children need help with their homework, and there's just no time or energy to devote attention to the children. So they tweak the care split platform in such a manner which would let parents coordinate the supervision of homework via video chat. So they made that pivot, and now they're continuing to pivot. They're now looking at, in the new normal, as the return to work happens partially, some people might not ever go back to office, and some people might go to office but only partially, and they might work in office on rotation, and there'll be social distancing norms, and so the new kind of workforce and workplace will evolve. And what they're doing now is, if that is the new normal that is going to be in terms of the workplace, the workspace, the workforce, how would childcare look like in that scenario? What would be the necessities or demands of the childcare phenomena, and how do we pivot our platform to get ready for that? So they are now working on that. So interesting pivots, but that's what's happening. So what's the way forward, and specifically for startups, as far as we can see? Now, we all know that so far startups have concentrated largely on growth in terms of numbers. So top line mattered, and it mattered at all costs. So people talked about burn rates. Rarely people talked about making profits. So they're talking of burn rates and that kind of stuff. But the whole thing was, how do we quickly scale the top line? I think with this COVID-19 crisis, that thinking might change. Startups will look at fundamental economics as traditional businesses have been doing, where the focus might shift from rapid growth in numbers more to sustainability and stronger economics across the board. So more, looking at the business financials in a more conventional fashion. And the whole focus will shift. There will be a lot of focus on quality and overall, unit economics improvement. So everyone would look for, good unit economics. Now, the other thing is, I would say this, that especially for startups, their greatest asset are actually their employees. And that goes without saying for any business, but especially in a startup scenario, it is very important. If the unit is highly motivated, employees have high morale, better chance of success. Now again, easier said than done. We all know that there are a lot of stresses, right? But it is important for startups to ensure their employees are duly motivated at this time, because we all know that hikes, bonuses, that might not happen in the short term. But equally, it is far more important in these times that you are able to retain key talent. So key talent retention should be the watchword, and keeping the employees motivated, fired up, is extremely important in these times, maybe even far more important. And of course, the need for continuous innovation. Now, let's dive a little bit into this whole innovation business, the innovation topic. And, everyone, as, we saw earlier, it's a broad brush term. It means a lot of things. It may mean different things to different people. It could be contextual. It could be small stuff. It could be big stuff. So is there a framework to innovation that one could look at? And could someone chart an innovation path, so to speak? How do you plan for innovation? Where do you start with innovation? Where do you go? What do you do? So, I found this very interesting framework. This was brought forth by Professor Mohanveer Sahni from MIT Sloan Management. And by the way, this is not something new. This was propounded in 2006. So Professor Sahni, he came out with an innovation radar. Think of it like an innovation framework. You see it here. I apologize for the poor quality of the visual. But what it is it has, he said that innovation can have 12 dimensions, 12 dimensions. And of those, four are, you would call them probably pillar dimensions. So, that is underpinned by offerings. So what's your product or service? What is your value proposition? That's your offering. Then who are your customers? So which target segments you want to service or appeal to? Those are your customers. Processes. What are the processes that you use to make your products or services? What goes into the making of those? And finally, presence. So how do you get your products and services to your target customers? Where do they get to consume those or get those? So on and so forth. And if you go from offerings to customers, you transcend through platforms and solutions, and we'll talk about these in a while. If you go from customers to processes, you talk of customer experience and value capture. If you go from processes to presence, you talk of organization structures and supply chain arrangements and relationships. And if you go from presence to offerings, you talk of, networking and, leveraging the brand and so on and so forth. So basically the contention he brought forward was that, look, most times, even in well-set businesses, when people think or, talk of innovation, mostly they're talking of innovation in their offerings, products and services. So what new features or functionalities can we bring in, or can we bring forward new products, and so on and so forth. So most of the innovation is centered around offerings. But what the contention here is, there are 11 other dimensions where you could innovate. And if actually you innovate in multiple dimensions at the same time, so for example, if you innovate across 2 or 3 dimensions and you do that simultaneously, you would probably create competitive differentiators versus your competition, and probably you would then become the leader, was the contention. So let's look at some of this. Just give me a moment while I take a sip of water. Just give me a moment, please. Okay, just checking. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir, we can
Yes,
hear
sir,
you.
we can hear you.
Okay. So offerings, obviously develop innovative new products or services That's largely been the focus of innovation across industries. That continues to be. But also, for example, look at platforms. So basically, in platforms, you use the same basic components, but you configure them differently to bring out new kinds of offerings or new looking offerings or derivative offerings. So essentially, you are working off the same component base, but how you are packaging them, how you are assembling them, how you are bringing them together in the jigsaw puzzle would make the difference. Then you talk of solutions. So create integrated and customized offerings that solve end-to-end customer problems. Now, some of this is evident in the uh, digitally empowered industries, knowledge-powered industries, creating integrated, customized offerings, and taking care of evolving situations to bring forth solutions which are not solving part of the problem, but they're solving the whole problem end to end. So the customer just picks up your stuff, plugs it in, and it solves the problem in a particular area. Now, customers. Now you try and go into, so you have a certain set of offerings and you are targeting those at a particular target segment only. But in this new change scenario, you might cast your eye around and say, does my proposition also meet someone else's needs, unmet needs, unstated needs? Can I go to appeal to those needs and have those customers also buy from me? And maybe those segments are underserved. No one has latched onto those ideas, and you could be the first mover there and make a dent. The other area is customer experience. Now, see, customer experience had been a focus area even prior to this situation. So, for example, in the services industry, obviously, since the moment of truth with the customer happens at each interaction, think of the travel, tourism, and hospitality industry. To me, travel, tourism, hospitality industry is the epitome of service industry because it's very people intensive. The customers are individuals. Every interaction from the point that the customer walks in, let's say into a hotel, or no, even before that, when they make bookings on your portals, and when they get picked up from airport, when they come into the reception, and then the actual stay, the food, everything is a moment of truth. And there was a lot of focus on improving customer experience by leveraging technology in all service areas. Of course, services industry themselves were at the lead of it, using IoT technologies, using AI technologies, using chatbots to make sure that while they had a mass offering, but to the extent possible, they were tailoring it down to the individual's preferences. And this sentiment also proliferated into the people who are making products, for example. And the whole thing was, yes, we should come out with a beautiful product with great, features, benefits. But what we also want to concentrate is on the overall customer experience in not only consuming that product, but also dealing with the company. So when you walk into the showroom and prior to that, you've taken a look at the product online, you walk into the showroom, how do you get treated, how do you get sold to, and what is the packaging and what is the experience of unboxing and then using the
Hello. So your voice is breaking again, sir.
experience. Hang on a sec. Can you hear me?
Yeah, now it is clear. Yes.
Okay. So connections are unstable, talking of technology, and we have technology challenges. Okay. So what I was saying was this, first was always big time, but now it has become even because more and more the ability to provide a sort of physical-based experience to the customer, that ability is limited. Most customers will experience you digitally, remotely. Of course, it depends on the type of offering you have, but there's a lot of focus on making sure that customer experience is good. Then there's value capture. Value capture means how you get paid or create innovative new revenue streams. Now, here I will cite an example which might not relate directly to the current situation, but it's a good example of how you create new revenue streams essentially from the same product or service, and not by making a huge change in your business processes as such. So this is an example of a refrigerator manufacturer. I wouldn't name the company. And what they were doing was they basically said, look, we will basically be manufacturers of refrigerators. We will make them in volumes, and we will get those to our distribution channel, and that's that. We will not get into the services business. We will not build structures for after sales service maintenance, etc. Rather, we will appoint two or three very competent service partners, and we'll sort of leave it to them. So we will not get into this services business at all. So basically, there all the revenue was coming from selling manufactured refrigerators. Now, that worked well over a period of time, but then they started facing competition. That now that space is highly competitive, and as more and more competitors got into that arena, the margins start to shrink. Sometimes the component costs would vary because of various global supply chain situations, and therefore their basic models started to seem untenable. So they then got back onto the table and said, what do we do about it? So what they did was they hit upon an idea. They said, let's leverage IoT technology. So what they did was they started embedding sensors in all their refrigerators. And of course, that meant some level of upfront investment in technology and technology platforms. But what these sensors would do is they would monitor the health of all the critical subsystems of the refrigerator, like the compressor, the electricals, the electronics, and how the whole the refrigerant, how it's working on all these sensors. They would monitor these critical parameters, and these would be relayed real time back into the manufacturer. And then basically using analytics on this pool of data and applying predictive analytics, the manufacturer could actually predict in advance when a refrigerator would need maintenance service and for what reason, what subsystem would likely go down, so on and so forth. So basically with this, they could come up with a maintenance lead. And what they did was they started monetizing this information, and they said to their authorized service providers that I will share these leads with you at $1 a piece. Okay, so you pay me $1 each for each lead, and I will share these leads with you. So it works well for everyone actually. The manufacturer gets basically service revenue without being in the service business, because by selling leads, maintenance situation leads, they're earning revenue where that revenue never existed earlier. That revenue stream never existed earlier. The authorized service providers now have access to a funnel of opportunities which are qualified in a sense, because that maintenance event 99.99% is going to happen, and it is going to happen when predicted. So they have a qualified lead funnel, and because there is competition between three, they to the customer they'll have to make a bidding. So the customer now has a choice of three different bids for the same service. The customer can choose which bid to go with for the same service. So it works well for everyone. It works for the manufacturer because they now have a new revenue stream. It works well for the maintenance service providers because they have qualified leads and they can plan. It works well for the end customer because now they have competitive bids for the same service. So just example, no, this is too neat an example. Of course, there are some flaws in there. On ground, things don't work out perfectly sometimes. But it's, if you think of it, it's a great example. Now look at processes now and how this relates to how do you redesign your core operating processes by your sense and adapt approach so that it improves overall efficiency and effectiveness. How do you look, the next is organizations. How do you look at organizational structure? Is it the optimal structure based on your business and the evolving scenarios? And does it warrant that you change your organizational structure as well? Supply chain. So thinking differently about sourcing and fulfillment. Now this has also come to the fore, this whole thing about supply chain. Why? Because global supply chains have been disrupted. People are realizing that over dependence on a limited set of suppliers based in certain geographies only can be problematic in such situations. There's a whole rethink on supply chain relationships. People are now looking, of course, to de-risk their supply chain risks. So they're looking for a more geo-diversified, if I may call it, a variety of suppliers, and that opens up opportunities for startups to some extent, I would say, in certain industries. But also in terms of the whole relationship aspect, supply chain is very critical to the success of industries. So now they are looking for supply chain partners who are willing to work alongside with them to step out of the written contracts. So, contracts are written and contracts are contracts. Not every aspect of a relationship can be captured in the written word. And these relationships are tested in times of crisis. So supplier partners who are willing to step out of the written word, go a little out of what was actually contracted for, and seem to be helping with the situation. Those relationships are becoming far more valuable, more solidified, and we all know that we would always appreciate a friend in need. That thing will always stay with us for our lifetime. We would always have better trust. Guess what? It is also true in business. And there is something called the speed of trust. There's a whole concept around speed of trust, which basically says that in any given business environment, which consists of a lot of handoffs, even whether internally or externally, and generally time is lost in those handoffs. It's like a relay race. So one to the other in the process. And if the trust is lacking, then you build a lot of inspection, you build a lot of oversight, and you check and you recheck, and that slows down business. But if there is trust which has been built through these relationships, it also automatically leads to velocity in business because of the speed of trust. If you trust someone, you will not check, recheck, to death. You would trust at a certain level and move on quickly. So it leads to business velocity. Next is presence. Now, this again is coming to the fore, new distribution channels innovative points of presence, uh, places where offerings can be bought or used by customers. So, a lot of those industries or verticals which basically had a lot of physical presence and the point of delivery was a physical space. Now they are saying, how do we get our product, services, experiences to our customer where they don't have to, it should not be physical space specific. It should not be location specific. How do we do that? So a lot of businesses move, scrambling to find a digital presence and establish a digital presence, so on and so forth. This is what it talks to. Networking. So create network-centric, intelligent, and integrated offerings. So this is a very broad brush term. Again, network could mean anything here. It could mean a network of ecosystem partners. It could mean networks in the technology sense, building integrated offerings in the technology sense, or even otherwise by creating ecosystem of partners which are closely integrated in business sense to your processes. They're aligned in vision and mission to you, and they see themselves as part and parcel or extension of your teams. The other is, last but not the least, is brand. So you have an established brand, it's well known in some area. Can you leverage the same brand into new domains? I have to say that's quite tough. Leveraging a brand which is already established, is known for something, stands for something, leveraging that brand into new domains is tough, but it can be done. So basically, these are the 12 dimensions around which innovation can be done. And the whole idea is that if you get to innovate along more than 2 or 3 dimensions simultaneously, then probably you are pulling ahead of competition and you are on the way to either become the leader or stay the leader. So, am I making sense, guys?
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
Okay. So now, again, let's shift the discussion a little bit here. Okay. Now, with so many changes happening around, externally, and with those new business models evolving, sense and adapt, pivot, all that's happening. What I'm trying to do here is, in the limited sense of the discussion here, trying to define what would be the new normal look like, especially for young people who are just getting into the workforce or about to get into the workforce or start their own business, or even people who've been in there for some time, sort of getting, with all these changes sloshed around, there's a fair amount of ambiguity. We are living in this VUCA world. What would be the new normal look like? Maybe. So this is an attempt to, paint a picture. May not be perfect, may not be accurate also going forward, but let's give it a try. Okay. So for first is, because the nature of work is changing and there are external factors that are driving that, there are a lot of internal factors that are driving that, you could be sure that the workplace in the new normal would look different. Now, even prior to the current situation, the workplace trends were evolving in a certain manner. There were certain shifts already visible. Now those will probably accelerate. So let's talk about some of those trends. So the first trend that was existing and may accelerate now is, the flattening of corporate structures. So the so-called corporate ladder, that was already collapsing. People were talking of flattening the hierarchies, flattening the organizations. So what that meant was, from, let's say, the 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 layers between, let's say, a fresh joinee, the layers of organization or managerial hierarchy or what have you, from a fresh joinee to the CEO, Typically there would be probably 15 layers. Those were being, people were talking of cutting it to 10, then 8, then 7, so on and so forth. And that was a trend already visible. And on the other hand, what progress meant, especially within a corporate regime, was how quickly and how high you move up that so-called corporate ladder. So if I went from being a line manager to deputy manager to manager, so on and so forth, that was upward movement, that was progress, that was promotion. That's how career progression was being viewed. Now, this whole model was a legacy of the Industrial Revolution, because as a result of the Industrial Revolution, businesses were built on economies of scale, standardization, strict hierarchies, and all that. But in the new sort of knowledge driven world, this was already collapsing. And like I talked about, there was talk of flattening of organizations, so on and so forth, and those set off some trends, and those trends will now accelerate. So let's talk about these. Now, career paths will become fluid, and growth would not just mean going up the ladder. It could actually also mean going sideways or going zigzag, not following a straight path, in the upward direction in that sense. So you're not looking in just one direction. So you're looking at a lattice shaped organization, or beehive shaped organization, where growth would come by doing different kinds of roles, by having new experiences, by acquiring new skills, by tapping into new networks, by being a part of new projects. And you would grow and you would stay relevant, I would say, by acquiring a portfolio of transferable skills. That's kind of, it's a kind of, it kind of sounds funny, transferable skills, but let's see if we can discuss this a little bit further. So large organizations in these recent times have already had a challenge in hand, trying to attract smart young folks like yourselves from the new generation to come and work for them, because they would seem to be boring organizations, very staid, nothing exciting. They would seem like organizations from your grandparents' days, or basically boring. Whereas the generation here is looking for a more entrepreneurial environment, even within the confines of a corporate environment. So basically, it translates to more freedom to operate, less supervisory control, and the corporate world is responding to it in some manner. So they are looking at entrepreneurship programs where they're giving a lot of leeway to employees to think and act like the owners of a particular project. And basically, this means you have the freedom to take full ownership of particular domains or projects, but you are held to the outcomes. Obviously, it's not a free for all. There's nothing free. There's no free ride in this world. But you given direction, you're given tools, you form dynamic teams. You are in charge of the project. There is supervision, but it is minimal. It's more towards providing direction and correction rather than supervising. There's less bureaucracy, and sometimes those projects give you very high visibility, including and up to visibility up to the CEO level. So basically cutting through layers of management. Now that's happening in some progressive organizations. I would say that trend would accelerate in the new normal. So, you could be sure that workplace structures will evolve very quickly from here on. The second is the effect of artificial intelligence. And again, in recent years, anyway, automation was becoming increasingly prevalent in many areas of the economy. And it started with absorbing the routine aspects of jobs, repetitive elements, and automating them through AI. And the argument was that it will free up time for more value-added creative work. And there are arguments on both sides, and I'll come to both sides of the argument in a minute. But in the space of AI, artificial intelligence, machine learning, robotics, there are two things that are very prominent. One is the sheer availability of data and the increasing availability of data. So with data is coming from all over the place, coming from your smartphones, coming from low cost sensors that are getting everywhere, coming from you know you know any kind of digital platform or service that you might be consuming. Everything is throwing up data, so a huge amount of data sloshing around, too much of it actually sometimes. So there's this huge availability of data, and now there is increasing ability to organize large volumes of data, analyze that data, and bring forth actionable intelligence from it. This ability, so the combination of availability of data and the ability to do something intelligent from it, this is really accelerating. So you have, cobots now, cobos or cobots. Basically, these are robots which work seamlessly with human colleagues. Okay, human colleagues. So they are being seen in factories and various environments where the workforce is hybrid. You have robots and you have human beings working in collaboration with each other. That's happening. And it is being said that, someone was telling me, hey, Arun, if things go like this, very soon you might have a robo boss. And I'm saying, no, oh gosh. So I'm counting my years to my retirement because I don't fancy working for a robo boss. Whatever people might say, I have my own feelings about that. So I hope this whole thing, comes after I've, gone out of actor service. Just joking, that's a joke. But sometimes these things have an uncanny ability to come to life very quickly and too soon before you are mentally prepared for it. But anyway, so the power of AI that's on the rise. It's a fallacy to think that it will affect only blue collar jobs or manual jobs, so to speak. Even white collar jobs are at risk as the capabilities become more sophisticated. That's already happening. For example, data analysis work in areas such as advertising and finance, which traditionally was done by people from the industry who are in the know. They had some sense of the business. They had some historical knowledge. They were seen as gurus, and yes, they then took data and they came out with their own analysis and predictions. A lot of that is now getting automated. You have very powerful platforms, AI platforms that can do a lot of work. So even cancer diagnosis, you would have heard, these platforms can look at, they can sift through symptoms, they can, they have access to huge repositories of medical histories and latest research papers. That's all sitting in their brains, so to speak, and they can call upon that knowledge and quickly deliver diagnosis and even suggest potential treatments. Now, these are highly specialized jobs in that sense, diagnosing cancer and suggesting potential treatments. This was always the domain of specialists. Now that's being overtaken by machines. It's a little uncanny in that sense, and a little, I would say, you tend to think, what would happen, what's next in that sense. So optimists have been arguing that, look, what machines are doing is they're probably making it less error prone. They're freeing up time for human beings to concentrate on creative, more thoughtful activities. That's a very overall statement, I would say, motherhood kind of statement. That may be true. But to the person who's been doing that job and find herself redundant, that it's no solace to that person, right? The machine would have, freed up her time, but that's what she's, that's all the skills she had or he had, and it's no, it's no solace to that particular person who's about to become redundant because of a highly intelligent machine taking up that job. There's no solace to that person. But and the reality is that a very large fraction of us is actually generated, rooted, predictable. Large workforces alone, very small fraction of the workforce does breakthrough innovative stuff on a daily basis. Most of the work is routine, repetitive, and predictable. So get retained. How do they get retained? Retrained for what skills? And would those skills also become, sort of redundant very quickly? These are enormous challenges. So I'm just putting thoughts out there. I'm not, any solution or easy answers. I'm just laying out a picture as to what a normal. So now you have a lot of sorry, is there a comment?
Yeah, your voice is still breaking.
Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So let's talk about the third aspect, which is the human cloud. And what is the human cloud? So these days you have a lot of freelancers which are making their services available online, basically for a lot of digital tasks. So this is a vast global pool of freelancers, and these people are willing to work on demand from any location, from their homes, anywhere, and they are quite skilled in some digital tasks. And there, on the other side, there is a demand for such freelancers. So employers are waking up to the potential of these uh, what are called taskers, freelancers, taskers, and employers are becoming requesters. So they put out bids for certain tasks or projects, and these freelancers or taskers, they bid for those, and they get allocated these tasks, and which have to be worked within certain deliverable parameters, SLAs, and time bound. And the market for this is quickly evolving. As you can see, the nature of work is changing, and this is an increasing tribe. This is an increasing trend. And McKinsey earlier estimated that by 2025, about 540 million workers would have used these platforms to work digitally, offer their work digitally in a freelance manner. And well, it has obviously advantages for companies who are looking to get work done. It offers an instant access to cost economic talent pool, willing talent. They don't have to go through lengthy recruitment processes. There is no need to pay any overheads or holiday or sick pay. So economically, it is attractive. For the taskers also, it is beneficial because these taskers come from across the globe, from across society segments, people at different life cycle stages. They could be busy mothers who have to take care of kids, or people who have to take care of sick parents, elderly parents. They can't go out to work, but what they can do is they can work in a disciplined manner from their homes on digital platforms to deliver these kind of deliverables and make sure of their own well-being and their own earnings. Uh, and economists are saying, this is a powerful tool for redistribution of wealth also, because suddenly you have an influx into the workforce of people who probably might not have been participating in the workforce earlier, and this leads to a good, equitable redistribution of wealth. So there are several arguments, both for and against, and of course, this leads to flexi working hours, flexi working environments. All those good things also come into place, and typically these taskers have been doing very well. They are highly motivated, they are skilled. Of course, nothing is perfect. So maintaining quality, meeting deadlines and all that has to be taken care of. Nothing is perfect. There's always a human element as well. But the point here is there is a rise, and there will continue to be a rise in this so-called human cloud. So, which brings me to the last aspect of our discussion. And so we've talked through how these the situations have been evolving, what continues to evolve, the world is changing as we speak, so on and so forth. So if that be the case, if there are so many changes sloshing around you, how does a young person like you, how do you increase your chance of success in the emerging world? And again, I have to say that I don't have a cure all pill to offer you. You take this thrice a day and you'll be all right. These are just pointers. A lot of them you'd see are very broad brush statements, but I'll try and bring some of those to life for you. So someone famously said that you cannot survive today's war with yesterday's soldiers. And I would like to tweak that saying a bit, and I would go out to say that you cannot win tomorrow's wars with today's soldiers. So your educational qualifications and skills, they are a great start. You need them as a base. You need qualification, you need skills, but in the new world, those may not be enough. So what's required? What are employers looking for? What should you be doing consciously to increase your chance of success? So from an employer's perspective, increasingly people are looking for employees who have their eyes on the results, and they're not hung up on a defined process. Uh, Basically, they're looking for people who can get the job done. Getting the job done is extremely important. So when they're looking at your CVs, they want to see conclusive proof of ownership of projects. So Ownership doesn't necessarily mean you're leading the project. So it's a little bit from leadership. It's ownership. Basically, it is an indicator of things that as an individual you take responsibility, you take complete responsibility, and you get the job done. Now, if you show ownership, that's also a leadership trait. That's one of the most important leadership traits, by the way. But the two are a little different. So, ownership, which then gives you the ability to be an effective leader also, because as an individual, you are dependable, you are reliable. Those are the basic qualities. And increasingly, you would see that every industry would need people with some technology skill. Some digital skills are required increasingly. So there would be a sort of a tech element to probably every job, and hence there would be the need to skill, reskill, pivot. You have to be in a lifelong learning mode. Learning would never end. By the way, as you can see, I'm not exactly young. I'm quite old actually. Even I'm learning even now. I, I, I spend about, I would say, 40 hours over the year under formal training, which is basically new stuff for me. That's formal. But informally, I'm willing to learn from everyone. In fact, I've been learning a lot on the go from your generation. I have to say that because your generation is amazing. The kind of lateral thinking abilities you have as a generation, you think out of the box. You are not constrained by some old ideas. Your thinking is not straitjacketed. You have unfettered minds. You you are not risk averse. That interacting with people of your generation, which I'm in a lucky position to do as I'm doing today, that has enhanced my learning as well, and I'm continuously learning from you folks. So all I'm saying is lifelong learning mode is to the mode to be in. Then next is critical thinking. So what is critical thinking? Let's define it. Critical thinking is the ability to look at facts, analyze them, and make a reasoned and logical judgment. Now, again, easier said than done because we have our own biases. Everyone has, anyone can take the same set of facts and analyze them and yet come up with different outcomes or judgments. That happens. We have our own biases. So, but critical thinking is how do you look at facts, how do you analyze them, how do you come up with a reasoned and logical judgment. Also, it is the ability or the propensity rather, I would say, not to simply accept all arguments and conclusions that you're exposed to. So someone comes up to say, oh, I'm so experienced in this area, and by the way, this is how it is. Here's the conclusion, by the way. And by the way, these facts also lead to the same conclusion. So don't think too much about it. Very good. But I think you should have an attitude which involves questioning such arguments and conclusions. Questioning, not necessarily just taking the 180 degrees opposite view and arguing, but questioning. So that's critical thinking. The next is empathy. The empathy bit is increasingly important in this world, increasingly important. Empathy is the ability to understand and share the feelings of another. This is not sympathy. This may not be agreeing with the other person if that person has a differing viewpoint or feelings that are not in consonance with your own feelings, but the ability to understand that, okay, you have your own feelings, you are entitled to those. And by the way, I understand where you're coming from. I understand your feelings. I can share those feelings. I may or may not agree. Okay. So that is empathy. The next is cultural awareness. Now, you could be sure that, despite of what a lot of people might be saying, this is a truly globalized world, and you would be working across cultures. You can be sure of that. Even now, today, India is a microcosm of multiple cultures, and we in our day-to-day lives we interact, live with, work with, you know across multiple cultures. So I would say to a large extent, we are a culturally aware society, but we would be expanding our ambit to imbibe the global culture. And so being culturally aware, culturally sensitive across cultures, extremely important going forward. The next is storytelling skills. So what are storytelling skills? No, this is storytelling skills are not, this is not about fibbing, okay? This is not about hard selling stuff. This is not about fancy presentations. So storytelling skills are the ability to sell concepts and ideas in the new world, whatever position you might be in. Even if you are a startup or you're a founder of the startup, you will be spending a lot of time making other people understand your ideas, understand your concepts, convincing them of your ideas and concepts, or at least engaging them in a discussion intelligently and intelligibly, and that needs storytelling skills. The other is emotional intelligence. Now, what is emotional intelligence? Emotional intelligence is the capacity to be aware of, control, and express one's emotions, and to handle these emotions in interpersonal relationships in a judicial manner and in an empathetic manner. So, first of all, you should be consciously aware of your emotions. You should be able to control your emotions, and you should be able to express those emotions, but in a very balanced manner, so that your interpersonal relationships are not negatively affected. This is true of life, and this is true of all relationships. Relationships within our family, with our parents, with our partners, life partners, our spouses or would-be spouses. Yeah, this is what life is all about. How do you conduct your relationships? Defines what kind of life you lead, right? And in that, emotional intelligence plays a very important role. And so is true of the work environment, because remember, in the work environment, whatever be the kind of work, you will be dealing with human beings. You will be dealing with peers, suppliers, customers, bosses, you know, investors, whatever. They're all human beings, right? They take, maybe they take rational decisions, but a lot of rational decisions are actually based on how you perceive the other person coming across to you, right? So emotional intelligence is extremely important. You should have the ability. Sometimes one gets very agitated, excited, angry, and there's this, you want to respond immediately and react immediately. It's all fine to feel that. We are all human beings. It's important to feel that because you are a live human being. But how do you then channelize that? How do you control it? And how then you bring it out is extremely important. Okay. Next is creativity. And creativity a lot of time comes through experiential learning. Sometimes creativity is innate, which is part and parcel of our being. And why it is important in the work context. So, I talked about digital skills, technical skills, all that's important. Equally important are creativity. So there is the need from people from liberal arts and humanities, from people from design background. They are playing a very big part in technology innovation. So when a company is building a great UI, UX, user interface, you need people from liberal arts backgrounds, you need people from humanities, you need people from design backgrounds. So, for example, when Microsoft were developing Cortana and they wanted to give it a sort of a personality, they built a team of playwrights and liberal arts specialists to design the personality of Cortana. How interesting. So basically, marrying principle of liberal arts with engineering will probably get the best out of even artificial intelligence. It will reduce bias. There will be roles like, AI algorithmic bias manager that could be potentially created as well, with marrying technology with creativity, humanity, that kind of stuff. And last but not the least is something called grit. It's a very simple word, it's a very short word, but it's a very deep word, if I may say so. So, what is grit? It's the perseverance and passion to attain long term goals. Long term goals. Why? Because, my friends, it is not a sprint, it's a marathon. It's not a sprint, it's a marathon. So, with that, I end my presentation. And Urmika, over to you.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much. It was a really delightful presentation and it was so detail oriented. And I mean, one of the lines you said about tomorrow's war cannot be won by today's soldiers was so deep and so wise. And we have some questions for you if you
Yeah.
have the time.
So thank you so much. Actually, we got a lot of clarity also because of the way you explained. And it was like every point you explained with some example and the number of innovation, the 12 models that you showed about supply chain networking. I think that was really great. We just have, I think we got a lot of questions in the beginning, but as you explained that, the clarity came. But we still have a few questions.
Sure.
Urmika, can you just ask them?
Yeah. So the first question we have is how do you enable people in big organizations to adopt and adjust to the business model changes?
Okay, I think here over communication is important from the leadership. Transparency is important. So, look, we, for example, as a technology company ourselves, have had many pivots in our business. As you can imagine, in the technology business, the pace of change has been accelerating. I'll give you an example. When I joined this industry, uh, technology cycle changes used to happen probably every 8 years. So, what I mean is a fundamental shift in technology from one technology to another, the interval would be 8 years. That got shortened to 4 years, got shortened to 2 years. Now it stands at between 12 months to 18 months, depending on what aspect of technology you're talking about. Some technologies are evolving at breakneck speed. So you can imagine such short cycles in technology shifts, and hence uh, having the ability to make the business pivot, the process pivot, the skills pivot, and the cultural pivot is extremely important and increasingly tougher. What helps the situation is if the leadership communicates extensively and to the point, maybe it starts to seem like communication overload. But I think more the communication, the better, more the transparency, the better. And my experience has been that eventually technology takes care of itself. You need to take care of the people, their mindset, their skill set, their motivation. If you take care of that, they will make sure that they will adapt to the technology shift, the business shift, the process shift, all the pivot, they will adapt to it. But you need to take care of their minds, their motivation, their skills. They need to be reassured that in they have a place in the new norm. I think that's most important, really. And it comes from communicating, and transparency.
I think that's a great answer, sir, about the pillars and the pivots. It totally makes sense. And the next question we have is, what are the three top skills one needs if she is in a cyclic business?
Okay, so again, it depends on the business, but and of course you need the basic skills for that business. And if there are changes taking place in the business and those are giving rise to a new set of skills, then you want to latch on to those early. But generically speaking, I've already spelled those out. So a lifelong mode of learning is important. Some of the other skills that I listed out are important. Resilience is important, grit is important. All those things that I listed, I can't keep it to three, I'm sorry, because there is a growing list. But I picked maybe seven or eight of the most important. Those are extremely important. And more than anything else, guys, I would say, you know, you could take a view of the future and there's only so much you can do because future is only visible one step at a time, right? You agree? I mean, I can't look at too much into the future, and unless I'm a clairvoyant. I'm not a clairvoyant. No one is a clairvoyant. So future is like you are walking on on a dark forest path with a lantern in your hand, and all that is visible to you is probably the next two steps, right? And you have to take ongoing decisions based on what is visible on the next two steps. So is there, some swamp there? Is there a snake in your way? Is Can you see a tiger's eye in up ahead? You have to react to those. I mean, all I'm saying is have that mindset to make those continuous pivots, be in lifelong mode of learning, improvise, innovate. That's all I can say.
I think that answers the question. And the next question we have is, it's a really common question, and you know that the corporate and the startup structure is actually kind of merging now because there are a lot of entrepreneurs also coming up. So, what is the reason to choose a startup or a corporate, and what should we expect when choosing either?
You mean as a career choice, is it? Should
Yes.
I go into a corporate versus should I go into a startup?
Yes, exactly.
Okay. Again, it's down to the individual's makeup as to what you believe you are cut out for and what excites you. In the corporate world, also, although they seem very staid and boring, like I said, there are sort of pods opening up where they can offer you exciting opportunities as youngsters. They probably value your lateral thinking, your excitement, and the ability to move fast in an unfettered manner. But I would say those are highly evolved corporations. There are some of them, but not a whole lot of them, unfortunately.
Hmm.
Um, but also, some of these corporations can serve as great grounds to sort of sharpen your teeth, go in there, sharpen your teeth, prove yourself at something, gain some experience, while on the side, dabble in some kind of project of your own. Uh, Now, coming to startups, if the team is extremely important. How well you would gel with the team, how tightly you will integrate as a team, what commonality of purpose and vision you have. A lot of things come into play. And by the way, I have to say that when you get into those situations, uh, yes, it's important to be emotionally attached to your idea and your venture, but also please be realistic. Um, you know, most times I've seen that the founders, especially, are so deeply in love with their idea, and which is a good thing to do. I'm not saying, because that kind of passion, that kind of commitment to your idea is important to succeed. Otherwise, you'll give up very easily. But also somewhere there has to be a sense of reality when you see that that idea probably needs tweaking to respond to the real world, or maybe it needs rethinking, or maybe just needs just pure dropping, and maybe you latch on to some other idea and make a complete pivot. Please be ready for that, because I've seen too many times the founders keep latching to an idea which is clearly being proven to be untenable, and thus causing themselves a lot of harm, causing a lot of harm to their own teams. And then you have another story of non-success. So I would, to whomsoever is getting into the startup scenario, I would say absolutely go plunge in, work your heart out, but please do it with an eye on reality. Just don't get so much romanticized in the idea that you forget there's a real world out there. So I know that's not a straight answer. I am not saying go this and do this. It's just because of the nature of things, I can only point to a certain factors. You have to internalize those factors to what kind of person you are, what kind of personality you are, and then take your own decisions.
Absolutely. So I think I completely agree with you because most of the startups even fail because they're so attached to their idea and they do not get a reality check now and then, which is really crucial. And the last question we have is it's a very interesting one. So, why do employers need experience and not only interest? And for experience, we need a job, but doing different jobs which we are not interested in, how is that useful for our employer?
Yeah, that's a good question, and unfortunately, it's a question, I would say, because you see, I'll tell you, different employers are taking a different view of things. Not everyone is highly evolved. A lot of these corporations now, like many years, they're running the business in a certain way. They find it difficult to change their thinking, their culture. How do they look at talent acquisition, talent retention? They just sometimes don't get it, and therefore they fall back upon the they've chosen, the often beaten path, so to speak, because that's where they find safety. At least in their thinking, they are safe. But like I said, there are corporations who are changing their thinking on this, because they're realizing that in certain areas there's there's nothing called an experienced base, because those areas are themselves new evolving areas. Those areas did not exist 2 years ago. So you can't have experienced skill. You might have skilled people, but you might not have experienced people in those areas. So you have to rely on the current crop, the fresh crop, because they are the only ones who have those skills. They might not have the experience, but they have the skills. The old workforce doesn't have those skills, and there's no way for anyone to have experience, because that area is maybe just 2 years old in itself. You know what I'm saying? So there is that realization that's happening. It's not proliferated, it's not as if it is generally visible, but that's changing. Hopefully the pace on that would pick up. But unfortunately, that is a question, because it is a question.
So, sort of follow up question is so, what kind of an employer are you? Do you look at experience that crucially or interest? And how do you actually select an employee?
That's ouch. That's a tough one. Okay, so I think where we are coming, it's contextual. So it depends on what kind of operation we are in, what country. So in those countries, there are countries, several countries where we are where we have initiatives that call for a fresh kind of a workforce, right? And there we would plumb for skills rather than experience, simply because of the factor I that said, that skills are just not available in those areas. Those are very new areas. There are countries where we have the kind of operations we have actually call for a very skilled workforce. Otherwise, those operations wouldn't work. We run live networks, complex technology networks. They have to run 24 bar 7 without any glitch. And if you are to run those operations at the back end, which is where the core operations is, you need people with high skills and abilities, with people who've been there, done that, uh, just so that the operations are maintained at a certain level. So I would say it is contextual. There are areas of technology where only new skills are available, and therefore we go for those. There are areas of operations where necessarily, because of the nature of operations, you need highly experienced people just to keep the lights on. So it is contextual.
I think that answers the question really well, sir. And does anyone have any more questions? I think, yeah, there's another question. So, from the way you spoke about AI and robots and advanced technology moving forward, would love to know your thoughts about the same and also the reason for your particular opinion.
So, and I think this is coming from Aditya. Aditya, I would love to connect with you offline because, frankly, this topic is very vast, and I would like to know your specific areas of interest so that I could answer this more meaningfully. But what I spoke was from sheer experience of what we are seeing in our immediate environment. At the end of the day, we are a technology company, and by the way, technology use is not limited just to technology companies. Even financial institutions, travel, tourism industry, they're all deploying AI technologies, automation technologies in various aspects of their operations, including things that touch customer experience. So, and that is why I thought it was important to bring up as a very potent force that will, shape the future of work. But I'd love to connect with you. I would love to connect with you to see what your specific areas of interest are. Okay.
I think that's great, Aditya. You might be really happy because you're getting to connect with Sir offline. And so we would just like to thank you so much for doing this session for us and for the students, because we really needed uh, you know these this presentation from you and this pep talk from you about the future and how difficult everything is going to be, and we all needed a reality check. So thank you so much for doing this for us, and we've taken up a lot of your time considering it had to end at
My
12.
pleasure. It's
And
my pleasure.
thank you so much, sir. I think you're really passionate about innovation,
Yeah,
and we love the passion and the wisdom you shared with us. Honestly, thank
yeah.
you.
It was there in every slide when you were talking about every single point. We could actually feel like how much knowledge we have been learning from you. Thank you so much for that.
It's my pleasure, folks. Always look forward to such interactions. And by the way, you're too kind. I don't think I deserve so much praise as you were showering on me, but I'll take it. And thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank
Do
you.
you have anything last thoughts or something that you would like to share with us?
Yeah, I would say, look, just stay positive. There's everything to look forward to. Uh, you know, Sometimes we get bogged down with all the negative news floating around us. Just disregard some of that. Look at the positive aspect. There is a fair amount of positives to look forward to, and I wish you all the best for your future. I know you guys, your generation will be an amazing generation. You will all succeed. You know why? Because you are not encumbered, you're not weighed down by history, negative history, let me put it this way. So just go out and make your mark on the world.
Thank you so much, sir. That's really kind of you. And
Thank you for being so optimistic about our generation.
You guys are the future. So take care. All the best.
Thank you so much.